Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We are super excited to be joining you from Japan today.
Yeah, we are in our portable recording studio in Osaka, Japan.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been recording on the road, so it's kind of fun to have our old school setup back again. It's a little bit less, I guess, like lush. We don't have our microphone arms and all that type of stuff, but really excited to be here with you today talking about Japan. And so we're going to have a number of Japan episodes because we've got a month here, like we mentioned in our last episode. So if you haven't caught it, the last episode of the podcast is all about preparing for this trip and specifically preparing with a baby. So this is the first time that we did a long haul flight with her. It's the first time we've done jet lag with her or any substantial jet lag more than like 2 to 3 hours. And we were pretty anxious going into it. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about how the long travels went, how jet lag was, how we kind of overcame that, and then talk about our first few days in Tokyo. Tokyo is a city that we've been to before, so it was really fun to be back, but we'll talk more about that soon.
Yeah, and so if you're mostly interested in traveling with a baby, traveling as a family, preparing for a long haul flight, adjusting once you've traveled to a different continent and getting over jet lag, there'll be lots of stuff you're interested in this episode. If you're mostly interested in like what to see and do in Japan, probably a little bit less exciting for you, but we'll have other episodes where we dive more into that, like attractions, places, part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think if you're interested in Tokyo, we will talk about Tokyo a little bit in this episode, but we also have some really great content from the last time we were here in Japan. We made a couple of really fun episodes, so we'll make sure that we link those in the show notes. So should we get started by talking a little bit about our epic travel day?
Yeah, so I think we covered this a tiny bit in the previous episode, but all the flights out of Mexico City to Japan are red-eye flights because it's like a 15-hour flight. That means if you leave at like midnight, 1 a.m., you're arriving in Japan bright and early, first thing in the morning. And so that's the way they're set up. And so we were flying out of Mexico City at like 12:30 in the morning. And coming from Querétaro, that means having to get there, get set up. And so we ended up deciding to hire a driver and take us to Mexico City, which is about a 3-hour drive. And then we're at the airport for quite a while before our flight.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple different options getting from Querétaro to Mexico City. We actually have a podcast episode on ways to travel around Mexico. But we decided instead of taking a bus, from the bus station to the airport, we decided to hire a driver because we just figured if there was any highway shenanigans or anything going on, it would just kind of, be a little bit more advantageous to be with a driver. And the drive is 3 hours, like 2.5 without much traffic. And so it was a little bit hard to decide when to go because like Ryan said, our flight was at basically like midnight on Thursday morning / Wednesday night, however you want to look at that. And we were like, well, if we go at like 6 p.m., we're going to inevitably hit traffic. We're going to hit traffic in like leaving Querétaro and arriving into Mexico City. If there's any delays, we'll be running kind of late. So we decided to just give ourselves lots of buffer time and leave at 3. It took us probably like 3 full hours, maybe a little longer because our driver was a bit duddy to get to the airport. So I think we arrived between like 6 and 6:30. Is that right?
Yeah. And one of the thoughts was that traveling at that time would be solid. One, to give us lots of buffer in case there's shenanigans. Sometimes people blockade the highway and stuff and really didn't want to miss our flight. And 2, it lined up quite well with like Lou potentially being able to nap, which she ended up not doing at all on the drive.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like our travels actually started out a little bit rocky. We had hired this driver. It was a company that we haven't used before. It's not our normal company that we go with, but they were recommended by actually 2 sets of friends that we trust. And we ended up getting the guy who runs the company, his partner. And one of our friends was like, oh yeah, I rode with him. Like, he's not as good as the other guy. And I was like, well, I'm sure it's fine. Like, how bad can it be? And it started off with him like not being able to find our house and then taking the wrong like exit to like leave. And then I just moved over to like attend to Lou, and I see that our car is like super low on gas. And so then I'm stressed because running out of gas on the highway is crappy. It's horrible. I've had it happen once. I do not ever want to experience that again. And I was a bit frustrated. Like, we're paying, like probably double what it costs to take the bus so that we don't have to run into situations like that. It just felt like super unprofessional, and he was very rude to me about it. And so, there's that happening. And then, like Ryan said, we thought Lou might nap a little bit, and then she ended up not napping. She was like really not wanting to be in her car seat. And so I was a bit like, oh, here we go. But it actually ended up being that like the 3-hour drive was probably the worst / most stressful part of the journey, which is totally not what I anticipated. But we arrived to Mexico City Airport. We arrived, like I said, around 6:30. So we had about 6 hours before our flight, about 5.5 until boarding. We were able to check our bags, which was really great. So we got rid of most of our luggage, and then we went through security. Security was breezy. And then because of our American Express card, we were able to go to the airport lounge, which if you don't have a credit card or a priority pass or something that gets you into airport lounges, this is such a game changer. I feel like we just got this in the last like year and a half. And because we weren't traveling a lot when Lou was super, super little, we hadn't used it that much. And we've been using it a ton over the last couple of months. And it is just the best to have that. So we went and we had some dinner, we had some drinks, we relaxed a little bit, read books, et cetera, et cetera. Lou ended up falling asleep probably around like 8:45, and she actually slept for like 3 hours, which was really great. So we were basically like in line to get on the plane when she woke up. And so she had had a really solid little sleep. And then I think she was a little bit like, hey, what's going on? What are we doing? And it's like, oh, we're getting ready to board our flight now.
Yeah. And so one kind of big detail for us, we talked a little bit about it on the last episode, was we both kind of got hit about a week before the flight with a bit of dread about trying to have a wiggly 14-month-old with us in economy seats. And then a few days before the flight, got the email offer of like, hey, you can bid for an upgrade. And they had the price for what it would cost to like just like guarantee you get it. And it was expensive, but not crazy expensive, and felt within the range of, if you think about it in terms of like investing and feeling better over the course of the next like 4 or 5 days, because you're actually able to sleep on the plane. So we ended up upgrading and getting into first class for the flight, which I think made us feel a lot more excited about the actual flight. So like the whole day leading up to it, I think I felt excited as opposed to like a little bit terrified. But yeah, we got on the plane, and then the seats were actually kind of like a little bit like skinnier than I would have guessed, but like really nice seats that could lie all the way down flat, which I think was just like a total game changer for traveling for us with the baby.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have not traveled in first class very much, I think, in either of our lives. And so it's definitely like a lush treat to have that. And we've taken a lot of long haul flights and a lot of flights that involve jet lag and red eyes. And it's always, you're kind of hoping that maybe there's empty rows that you can move into, or maybe nobody occupies that third seat when you're a second. And like Ryan said, we were both like pretty anxious. I feel like it was to the point where it was like waking me up in the night or keeping me up with just like dread about not sleeping at all. And I know that's so silly because it's only, 14 hours of my life, and, we can do hard things and stuff. But at the same time, we just decided it was worth the investment for us. And like Ryan said, it was really nice. And so basically how the flight went was Lou, like I said, woke up just a little bit before we boarded, and then pretty quick after we took off. So probably within like an hour of taking off, like she was getting ready to sleep. So pretty much as soon as we were at altitude and I was able to recline our seats, I did, nursed her, and she was to sleep pretty quickly. And it worked for me and her to lie in the same seat. Like, she's pretty small still, so I was able to lie on my side and share with her, and she was able to lie flat. I was able to lie flat. It was tight, it was squishy, but I'm not going to complain because it was pretty great, I think, in comparison to what I was expecting. So she slept for about 5 hours, which was really great, like about 1:30 till 6:30. And I think you and I were both just completely amazed and also, I guess, a little shocked by how on point her circadian rhythm is, because it was like exactly the same time that she wakes up every day, even though she'd gone to bed later and she'd slept her first few hours in her stroller, and then she'd been up for about an hour before she went back to sleep. And so, yeah, I guess we were almost halfway through the flight at that point. So an hour from takeoff, 5 hours of sleep. You and I both slept during that part as well. So I feel like we were feeling pretty okay. And then she was awake for about like 3 to 4 hours at that point, which is kind of her normal wake window. So you took her for a bit, I got a bit more sleep. I took her for a bit, you got a bit more sleep. We did breakfast, played. It was kind of almost like a normal day. And it's weird because you're traveling through time, right? And because of the way we traveled, which was, I guess, west from Mexico to Japan, we were in the dark pretty much the whole time. Plus we were on a Dreamliner and they dimmed the windows. So it was like pretty much dark in there the whole time, but pretty much right on point of when she would have napped. She went down for a nap. She slept for 2 hours. I slept a little bit with her. I lied down with her, tried to sleep, and then she woke up and she was awake for probably the last like 2 to 3 hours of the flight. Again, just we took turns playing with her, and I even got to watch a movie. She wasn't super engaged with it, but because we had like the big seat, we were able to kind of like have some play space and for me to sit kind of on the end and watch a movie, which I totally didn't expect. So that was pretty great. And then we arrived around 6 a.m., I guess, in Tokyo. And maybe you want to talk about like what it was like sort of arriving and any other thoughts you have from that plane ride.
Yeah, I guess for the plane, I think the way we were thinking of it was kind of had this opportunity with just having one baby and not having to pay for tickets right now to make it. You can almost think of like, hey, pay for the nicer seat divided by 3 instead of by 2. We kind of joke though that like Lou will be like the first class baby and then definitely not happening once we're paying for 3 tickets. So, yeah, kind of a brief blip in time, but I think it was really nice having the extra space. And then we just kind of thought of it as like, hey, this is kind of an investment in like making this day feel a lot lighter, making our first couple days in Japan be things we can enjoy instead of things we're just kind of like groggy and stumbling through, because it would have been really hard just being in 2 seats in economy, given the size Lou is right now and not being able to like have her sleep on the floor. But yeah, overall flight was really solid. The flight to Japan from Mexico is a couple hours longer than it is on the way home. So kind of hopefully the way back will feel like even more comfortable, a different time of day. But getting into Japan, they have one of those kind of like send in all your information apps that you can fill out before you get to Japan. And so arriving was actually really smooth. It's kind of interesting. Heard from a couple people coming in that we've talked to that like, hey, everything at arrival was really smooth and easy. And a couple others who have been like, oh, huge line. So I think where you're flying into and the time of day matters a lot. We got there right at 6 a.m. We flew into Narita. I think it felt like our plane might have been like the only plane arriving, because once we got out of there, like it was just like us and a bunch of Mexicans who were on the Aeromexico flight. A few other people we talked to who had flew into Haneda Airport had mentioned like, oh, really long lines to get through immigration and customs. So kind of seems like it depends a little bit which airport you're coming into. But for us, we were like off the plane, through everything in the airport within like, I don't know, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, taxiing in probably both airports in Japan is like, you drive for like a long time because it's a super, super big airport. So from the time we touched down until the time we actually got to our gate, I feel like that was like longer than almost the whole other process. But yeah, it was kind of weird. It almost felt like, you know, flying during like early COVID days, like for anyone who did like a rush trip back to wherever they're from during those early pandemic days, or maybe traveled, you know, in the US in those early days, something like that. I feel like we just walked for ages and just like didn't see anyone. And I was like, what's happening here? It just felt like so strange. And especially because it is a busy airport and it's a busy city and all that type of stuff. But yeah, everything was really smooth, like Ryan said.
And yeah, the only other thing I was going to add was that as of, I think it's May 8th is the date where they're like finally getting rid of all their COVID stuff. So I think basically anyone listening to this, planning a trip, you won't have to do the app, not going to have to deal with anything like that. For us, it seemed like kind of one of those stages where they've decided they're getting rid of it. So they're not really like doing too much of it. People did check our temperatures, and they have kind of all these like booths set up from like, I guess, where they had like public health people before, which was kind of weird to see.
Yeah, I feel like it was a little bit like post-apocalyptic, which I mean, maybe that is the time we're in in some ways. But yeah, you can just see like the remnants of, I guess, kind of COVID times and stuff. And yeah, I guess interesting and a little strange to see, I think, especially having been in North America for so long, where so much of that stuff has been gone for a while now. But yeah, everything was really, really smooth. We got through immigration quickly. We got our bags really quickly. We were through customs super quick. And then we arrived on the other side of all that. And it was so early in the morning, like it must have been just a little bit before 7. And so we were kind of like trying to figure out what we needed to do. And, you know, the first thing we needed to do was get out cash. So we found an ATM so we could get some cash. And then we wanted SIM cards. The airport does have Wi-Fi. So I connected my phone and was able to, you know, look up directions to our hotel and, you know, just check a couple messages, like send our parents a little bit like, hey, we're in Tokyo, we made it safe, et cetera, et cetera. But we had to wait a little bit until the SIM card stations opened up. So then we got SIM cards, and it would have been ideal probably to activate our JR passes at that point, but they actually didn't. I don't think that office opened till like 8 or 8:30, and we didn't think it was worth it to stick around because Narita Airport is actually an hour away from where we were staying. It's pretty out there. And, you know, it's insanely expensive to take like an Uber or a taxi or something there. So we took the train and we were staying by the Skytree, which is a super great location. So we were literally able to like walk on a train, take this same train right to the Skytree stop, and then get out. And our hotel was literally like right there. It was super, super close. So super convenient with having baggage and a baby and stuff like that. And I was really impressed with Lou because, like I mentioned, she was up the last like 2 or 3 hours of the flight. And then by the time we got to the hotel, it had been like 3 hours from landing. So it was about 9 a.m. And it's such a time warp when you arrive somewhere from overnight. And yes, we slept, we got a little bit of sleep, but it's like you're still sleeping on a plane. You're still going through like the start of jet lag and stuff. And so it kind of felt like the day had just been so long already, but it was only 9. And so we show up at our hotel. I had booked it through American Express points. And so I had made a request with them to get early check-in. And we were able to get it, but not until 11 a.m. And so what we did is we took advantage of those 2 hours to go get some breakfast, to walk around where we were, orientate ourselves, and get some sunlight. One of the biggest like tips that is out there for jet lag is to try to start your day or just kind of live your day from when you land. So if you land in the morning like we did, you want to just like do your day as normal. If you land at night, you want to try to just go to bed as normal. You want to just like get onto that time zone pretty quick. And, you know, Lou had been up for a while. We had been up for a while. Everyone was pretty tired. And so I was pretty impressed with her that she made it until we got into the room. But do you want to just talk about like how you kind of felt? Like, I feel like it was so surreal to like walk off the plane, be in Japan, but then like get on the train, everything's in Japanese. You know, we don't understand anything. We don't understand anyone. And then it's like, oh, we're at this hotel. You know, we've had it booked for so long. We've been looking forward to this for so long. Like, what did that feel like for you?
Yeah, I think it was interesting because this is something we planned. Well, we had a trip we wanted to do to Japan a couple years ago. Didn't happen. And then we ended up booking this in October. So to be like finally at the day where we're like, oh, we're driving to Mexico City, getting on a plane, and then making it happen, I think kind of felt cool because it was, I can't remember the last time we booked something and planned something that far in advance. And then getting here too, I think, yeah, just like getting through the flight, it being really solid, sleeping pretty well, getting through all the immigration stuff, getting to the hotel, it's like, oh wow, like we're finally here. Obviously it felt like there wasn't any risks of not making it there, but just something that feels like, oh, there's so many roadblocks in the way. So yeah, really cool and really excited to be in Japan. And then I think we both were like, we kind of found out a few days before that like cherry blossom season had kind of come a little bit early to Tokyo. So we got there and we were able to see like some cherry blossoms, walk around, and just felt like really excited to be there. I think something else that was really cool for us was our friend Madison was in Tokyo at the time. Our friend Becky, who you guys have heard on this podcast, was in Tokyo at the time. So just like getting there too and knowing like, oh, we're going to like get out, meet friends, made it really exciting to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to talk a little bit about what it was like to be in Japan again after 6 years, but maybe we can talk a little bit about like the jet lag aspect of the first few days, because we were in Tokyo we arrived early on the 7th and we left on the 11th. And I would say those were like our worst days of jet lag. But the last time we traveled back from Asia, I remember being super, super messed up from the jet lag. And I don't know if this was like, I just didn't plan for it, or maybe it was because we'd been in Asia for so long. I don't know what it was that made the jet lag so bad, but I remember just feeling like absolute garbage, just absolutely terrible. And so I was kind of planning for like feeling really bad, and on top of that also having like a baby who was probably going to be feeling bad, and then obviously needing to take care of her. But arriving there, I was like, okay, I don't feel so bad. So we got early check-in. We got into our hotel after walking around, seeing some cherry blossoms, getting some food. We put Lou down for a nap. I think you went and like maybe did some work or explored a little bit or something like that. I stayed in the hotel room with her. I think one thing, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit more, is that we were in a pretty small hotel room. Like things here in Asia in general, but definitely in Japan, are just smaller. So despite being in like a nice hotel, probably even like a pretty sizable hotel room, like it was pretty small. So we only had one bed, really only one like living space that was right beside the bed. And so it wasn't super functional to have like two of us in the room while she was napping. Or if there were two of us, it's like one of us needs to be like at the desk or in the bed, and the other one needs to be like at the desk or vice versa, or in the bathroom. Like we had a really nice bathtub. So I think for a lot of sleep times, we rotated taking baths and stuff like that. But I think you went out and explored. I stayed with her. I tried to close my eyes a little bit, but just felt like way too overstimulated. She slept amazing. And so one of the tips that I'd received from a number of mom friends and parent friends who have traveled with their little kids is that you want to keep them on a pretty regular routine. So I think she went down around 11:15. That's a little later than she would normally nap in the day, but pretty close to her like nap that she takes. And the longest she will ever take a nap for is 3 hours. And we hit the like 2 hour, 45-minute mark, and like girlfriend was out. So I feel like because that time in Mexico is like nighttime, I feel like her body was like ready to go to sleep for the whole day. And so right around the 3 hour mark, we woke her up. So she slept from like 11 till 2. And then we went out. Like Ryan said, we had friends. We met up with friends, did some walking around, again, got more sunlight just to try to really accustomize all of our bodies, and did some exploring, got some food. And we knew Lou was tired because that evening she got pretty fussy while we were still trying to keep her up. And then she actually fell asleep in her stroller while we were on the way home, which is like really unlike her. But we ended up just getting like sushi from the grocery store and eating sushi like in the hotel room. So not a super luxurious first evening, but I think all of us were pretty tired. And I think you and I went to bed around like, I think we made it to 9 p.m. and we were kind of like, high five, we made it to 9. Let's go to sleep. And we wanted to make sure we got to bed early because we weren't sure how Lou would do. She did really great though. She woke up a little bit around like 2 a.m., had some milk, rolled around a little bit. We kind of just kept sleeping. She went back to sleep and then woke up around like 4:45, 4:50 in the morning. So about like an hour and a half earlier than normal. But I feel like considering what it could have been, I was like, okay, I feel pretty grateful that she did so well, especially considering the first day.
Yeah, I think that's the scary thing with having the baby is like, is she going to wake up at midnight? Is she going to wake up at 1 a.m.? Is she not going to refuse to sleep entirely? So I remember, we went out. I think it felt pretty good, made it through the day pretty strong. And we're kind of planning on getting a dinner meal out and stopped at a Starbucks just to have a tea and chat with our friend Madison. And it was like 6:45, 7. And that's kind of really when I feel like I got hit by the like sleep bug and just was like, I wanting to go like get some food and go to bed. I think, and that was kind of, Lou was getting super fussy. And then walking from there, we all fell asleep. So yeah, overall went really well. And yeah, she slept better than I would have expected. It's kind of funny with jet lag. I feel like it's one of those things where once you like pass through it, it's kind of hard to remember. Like I don't like looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, what was it like being super jet lagged? I feel like overall, yeah, you're just kind of like feel a bit groggy. And then one day you're like, oh, I feel like myself again. I think for me, maybe it's like day 4 or something. I had a day when I went out and did something and then I came back and I was like, oh, I feel like myself again. But overall, yeah, not too bad at all. And I think way better than we could have expected is in terms of how Lou handled it.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it is weird thinking about jet lag because it's like, it kind of sucks. But then at the same time, it's like, we just kind of like, we haven't been in Japan that long. It's been like less than 2 weeks. So it's been like less than 10 days at the time of recording that we like kind of were getting over this. I feel like to me, it feels like a little bit like dazed and confused when you get there. And then like the afternoon, I remember getting struck by a wave of tiredness. And again, same thing that you described in the evening, getting struck by that wave. And then over the course of the few days that we were in Tokyo, I feel like it was kind of the same thing. Like part of it was that Lou woke up pretty early for those first few days. Like it was right around 5 a.m., which is super early. Like even as parents to a small infant, that's like super early in the morning. And so it's just like natural to get tired, right? Especially when you're not napping. And I was resting with her a little bit while she was napping, but trying not to nap myself just so that my body could adjust and I wasn't getting daytime sleep when I normally wouldn't. And yeah, I feel like just getting that, like you get hit by this like huge wave of tiredness just in like strange moments that you maybe normally don't. But I feel like we kind of utilized the jet lag to our advantage, like just being up super early in the morning. We were like, okay, this is one of the biggest cities in the world. Like there has to be stuff going on early in the morning. And so just taking advantage of doing things first thing in the morning. So we kind of got in the routine of like getting up, getting going ready right away, bringing Lou back to the hotel room. She would take a pretty long nap. Like she was sleeping 3 hours all those days. We were needing to wake her, getting up, go meet with friends, do something fun, get a pretty early dinner, get back for a pretty early bedtime for her. And then, do things like one of us takes a bath, we rotate, sauna. Maybe you should talk about the sauna experience at some point. I think that would be cool. And yeah, just kind of taking it easy and whatnot. And we both used a little bit of melatonin, which I think was really helpful, just taking, a small dosage before going to bed. And that really helps you like sleep through the night and get adjusted. So I think melatonin, sunlight, and just getting on a normal routine as fast as possible was like the best thing we did, I think, for all 3 of us. So maybe we can talk about just like arriving in Japan and what that was like. Obviously, we've been to Japan before, but it's been 6 years, and it's been 6 years since we've been to Asia in general. And we also figured out it's been 6 years since we've been in a country where we don't speak the language because we speak Spanish. So let's talk about what it was like to arrive in a place where we don't speak the language and we also can't read the alphabet.
Yeah, I think it was both. I think we both had some like instincts to say things in Spanish just because obviously we're like English first language speakers, but that association between like, oh, I'm traveling somewhere and that place being Spanish has been kind of ingrained now that we've been in Spanish speaking countries for so long and taken so many trips to Panama, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Colombia. So much of our travels over the past 6 years have been to those Spanish speaking countries. So I think we both had moments where we were like, oh, see, or said things or like wanted to say something in Spanish. And yeah, it's funny, like we both learned a few Spanish words, so they're not Spanish words, Japanese words. And so that's been kind of helpful. But yeah, definitely kind of awkward, like fumbling and being like, getting back to like, pointing at things or asking, do you speak English?
Google Translate has definitely been a good friend of ours these last couple of weeks now.
Yeah, although I think we probably use it. I think a couple of things about Japan, people tend to speak more English than they let on, especially like if you're in Tokyo, you're in Osaka, you go into a coffee shop, like even some of those words, like the Japanese might use like hot latte, instead of whatever hot latte is like literally translated to. Like if you go into the 7-Eleven here and say hot latte, like they'll give you the coffee cup for the coffee machine. So I haven't used Translate a ton over like the past week, I don't think.
I feel like I've been using it to like take photos of packages and stuff constantly. I feel like I use it every day.
That's a good point. Yeah, actually, like I was thinking more so in conversation, but yeah, using it to like just look at packages, look at menus. That's definitely been happening. So yeah, I was thinking more just like in conversations, but I feel like in conversations it's like ohayo gozaimasu, good morning, konnichiwa, arigatou gozaimasu, eigo ga wakarimasu ka, which is like, do you speak English or do you understand English? Has been kind of the big go-tos.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's been really humbling. I think that being in a country where we don't speak the language, I'm kind of reminded of how uncomfortable that can be. Like when you want to tell somebody that they made you a great coffee or that you really enjoyed the meal and it's like you just don't have the words. So you're kind of using like hand signals or saying English things and they're saying Japanese things. And I'm like, I don't know if we're saying the same thing, but this was great. Or, you know, our daughter is a disaster in restaurants, like throwing menus on the floor, throwing rice on the floor, throwing food everywhere. The Japanese people and culture is very clean. So I feel like she's just making a mess and it's like we want to apologize. And on top of that, there's no tipping here. Tipping is not a part of the culture. And so I feel like we're like, we'd like to communicate how sorry we are and also give you a nice tip and thank you so much for your great service. But obviously that stuff is just a little bit different, but it's been really fun to be back here. It's been really fun to be kind of out of our comfort zones, but also like in a place that's very comfortable, that's very easy to be. It's been very refreshing to be in a place that's so safe, that's so organized, that's so clean, that's so quiet. It's just remarkable, like how things run in this country. And I think after being in Latin America for so long, and particularly Mexico, which we love Mexico, don't get me wrong. Like I love Mexico, but Mexico is not organized, quiet, clean. Things often do not run on time. And that stuff is fine, but sometimes it's nice to have the opposite of it. So I feel like that's been really refreshing after, you know, so long of being in Latin America.
Yeah, it's kind of like travel therapy a little bit to like have a few weeks of trains show up on time, everything's super clean. You can like, you know, just wander in any direction and you're not worried. One of the things that's really striking for me the past few days walking around the neighborhood we're in, we're just in a random suburb of Osaka where we found an affordable Airbnb. There's like 1 million bikes, and this is true of Tokyo too, and like no one locks their bikes. The bikes are just all unlocked. You can't find garbage anywhere. You can walk down like side streets and back alleys and like there's people around. Everyone's like super friendly and there's no sense of like, everyone just kind of like trusts each other and everything kind of stays organized. So it's very fun. I think for us, we both love kind of the like freedom and chaos that you experience in certain parts of Latin America, and just the liveliness, the warmth of people, which like here people are very like polite and friendly and do an amazing job at work, but don't get that same sense of like warmth. So I think, yeah, that's been really cool to experience here, especially with like having a small child, like just that some of the things that make it feel easier. Like I know one of the things, even as simple as like traveling in Mexico or Colombia, when you've got a baby, a stroller, 2 suitcases, backpacks, like if you're stopping somewhere, you're kind of like stressing about like, I've got to be mindful of where my stuff is, like, because someone could just come and take your stuff. And here it's like, you know, you can just put your stuff down, put your stroller by the door. Like at the hotel we stayed at last, people just like left their strollers in the lobby. They were all like, you know, sorted and organized, and the staff had a little cordon around them. But
I'm like, nah, we're not doing that.
The stuff would just like in, you know, Mexico, if you did that, someone would probably take your stroller. So yeah, I think it's been a really cool change of pace for us, and it's been, yeah, just like kind of feeling like just breathing a little deeper and feeling a little less stressed.
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting to think about how like your norm just kind of becomes so integrated in the way that you are. And I think an example of this for me is like, especially with the pandemic, there's been so many changes in like hours of operation or when things are open, and businesses in Mexico are notoriously bad for updating their like Google profiles. And so you look on Google, you find a restaurant, it's got great reviews, it's open from 10 to 6, you go, And I mean, if it's not open at like 10:15, that's not so weird, but you could go at like 1 and it's like, it's just closed. There's no updates on social media. There's no notice on the door. It's just like the business is closed. Like we have no idea what's going on. And I think on our like second or third morning in Japan, in Tokyo, we wanted to go activate our JR passes because we needed to get our train for when we were leaving Tokyo to head to Nagano. And I checked online to see like which place we could go to, and I double checked and I went to the website, and then I checked the little like JR brochure that they sent me in the mail with our like coupons that you have to take. And in my head, I was thinking, I feel like there's a chance that this just like doesn't happen. But we're like, okay, let's go for it. Let's use this early morning. Let's get there when it first opens. And so we go, we show up. Of course, the office is open. There's a bunch of people working, a bunch of people available to attend us. There was a little bit of a line, and I was a bit like, oh, is this going to take forever? No, everyone is efficient. Everyone got helped quickly. We got our passes activated. We got our first train booked. We had our train tickets for where we needed to go. And I didn't even connect until we were like back home about like my actions of like double checking, triple checking, and then setting myself up for disappointment is like so much of what has been ingrained in me over the last few years of living in Latin America. Cause that's just like how things are. It's no like hate on Latin America. It's just like how things are. And it's just not how things are in Japan. And so, yeah, that type of stuff has been really nice for us, and it's been really refreshing. And I feel like we've really enjoyed being here. And like I said before at the beginning, we're going to talk more about places we've been and what we've done over the last couple of weeks and just in general our trip, but wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about Tokyo. Tokyo is a city that we've been before. We bookended our last trip with it the same as this trip. So about a week at the front and about a week at the back last time, and we had 4 days to start there. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on returning to Tokyo. Like, what was it like for you to be back in a city that, I mean, is really one of our favorite cities in the world?
Yeah, it was really exciting. Tokyo is definitely one of those cities where it's just so huge that like you stay in different parts of it and it feels you might as well be in a different city entirely. So we were staying the first time there near the Sky Tree, which is actually the first time we were in Tokyo. On our very first trip, we stayed in more or less the same area, about like a 15-minute walk from there. So it was an area of the city we were somewhat familiar with, and it was cool to be there and explore. I think with the baby, one thing we kind of realized when we got there this time was just some of the distances. Like if you want to go from like where we were to Shibuya or other places, those can be like 45-minute, 1 hour trips. And so you can't really go explore as widely. But yeah, I think just one of those cities where there's like so much cool stuff going on. You turn a corner and you find something neat or interesting, beautiful, and then just remarkably quiet. Like you show up in a city like that and you're like, I don't get how there's so many people doing so much stuff, and it's just so calm and peaceful and quiet. Extremely walkable. Like you definitely notice on your feet the first few days where you're like, oh, my feet are sore. I'm putting in a lot more steps. And then I guess the final thing would just be like amazing food. Like the thing about being in Japan is you could go to a convenience store, get great food, grocery store, get great food, conveyor belt sushi, get great food, or go to like a really high-end, upper-class restaurant, higher-priced restaurant, and have amazing food. So kind of everywhere you go, there's lots of good food options. So yeah, overall was just super excited. We ended up staying like 4 days before we left, and definitely like excited to be in Osaka now, but also itching to get back to Tokyo.
Yeah, for sure. We went back and forth quite a bit about how long to spend in Tokyo on this trip, just because we have been there before. But I think, like you said, it's a city where just staying in a new area gives you like a new experience. And the last time we were there, we did a lot of stuff. So we've done a lot of kind of the main quote unquote tourist things to do. Like I think if you were to look at a list of top 10 or top 15 things to see and do in Tokyo, we've done probably the majority of them. And there's a bunch of things that we want to kind of repeat and see again. But what we kind of decided to do in this first 4 days was, I mean, one, take it a little bit easy because of the jet lag and just adjusting. Two, we had 2 friends in town, like Ryan mentioned, so we really dedicated time to spending with them. So it was very go with the flow. And then 3, we looked at a map and kind of looked at like, okay, what's in like our neck of the woods here where we're staying now, because when we come back to Tokyo, we're staying in a totally different area. We kind of looked at like, okay, what's like closer to us that we could do at that point when we come back. And so we kind of just divided things up based on that. And so we made a visit to the fish market, which is something we did do the last time we were there, but went and revisited, went early morning, one of our early morning wake ups, had some delicious, amazing tuna belly for breakfast. It was just incredible. Such a good intro to being in Tokyo and Japan in general. We went over to Ueno Park, which is a really popular area. We also were at Tokyo Station and in that area. And then we also went to an area that our friend Becky had, encouraged us to go to, which I'll need to look on a map and get in the show notes because I don't remember the name. But it's amazing being with somebody like Becky who's lived in Tokyo for so long, because she just knows these like little places that are not on like the top 10 or top 15 list. And it's so fun to just go check out an area. You hop off the train and it's like, oh, you're in another new place, and it's equally as cool as other places with great restaurants and nice experiences. And, it's clean, it's safe. It's so nice not to worry about all that type of stuff. So yeah, we had a really nice time being back there. And I think it's just the type of city that I feel like I could go back to like every year until I'm an old lady, hopefully, and still find new things to explore, because it's just so big and diverse and cool and fun. And like you said, the food is incredible. So we've just been walking our hearts out and eating our faces off, and it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And it was also fun. You mentioned kind of hanging out with Becky, hanging out with our friend Madison, who was in Tokyo for the first time. So kind of seeing her excitement for being there and kind of, just being able to like get somewhere new in the world and see friends we haven't seen for a long time was really fun as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we'll leave it here. We've talked lots on this episode, but in the next couple of episodes, you can expect updates from the other places we've been. So Nagano area, Kanazawa, Osaka, and then heading back to Osaka and area, I should say, and then heading back to Tokyo. So we still have lots to explore. So we'll be over here having a good time, living large, enjoying Japan, and then also keeping you guys updated through the podcast. So stay tuned for more updates on Japan, and thanks so much for listening.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanders Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast, and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.